At this time, I would like to call on Representative Mark Strama, who is the chairman of the Technology, Economic Development, and Workforce Committee, and serves on the Energy Resources Committee of the Texas House of Representatives. He has put early childhood development on his leadership agenda and has proven himself a valuable supporter in the legislature. At this time, I present to you Mr. Mark Strama for opening remarks and to begin the summit. Representative.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Well, this is my favorite topic for a lot of reasons, and one of, not the least of which, is that I have a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old, and it always gives me an excuse to tell stories about them. So I want to start by telling you a story about my 3-year-old daughter, Victoria, when she was 2.5. And we had scheduled an appointment on a Saturday morning from the exterminator. And here in Austin, there's an exterminating company called ABC Pest Control. And so the guy got here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the doorbell rings, and I go out and get it. And my wife was still laying in bed with the baby and with the 2.5-year-old Victoria, watching Sesame Street. And she called out to me from the bedroom, "Who is it?" And I yelled back, "It's the ABC man." And for the next 30 minutes, my daughter Victoria would not get out from under the exterminator's feet as he walked around the house spraying toxic pesticides, right? And I finally said, "Victoria, what are you doing? Leave that man alone." And she looked at me and she said, "But Daddy, I want to go with the ABC man." And I finally figured out it was because she thought this was the guy who had invented the alphabet. Comes straight from Sesame Street to our house. This was a big day for her. And I was sharing that story with some friends of mine who are professional educators, and they said, "Well, you're never going to have to worry about your daughter in school. Because at the age of 2.5, she already thinks the alphabet is cool." And there's something powerful about that, because that is a blessing she has. That is something that I hope we've given her, and the type of thing I hope we can give her through her whole life. But it's not something that every child in Texas is born into. And it's an extraordinary differentiator in terms of opportunities and the probabilities of success in life that no child deserves to be without. But that is denied to an extraordinary number of children in this state, not through intent, not through malice, but just because folks don't know how to provide those opportunities to their children. And I can take that story one more level at the expense of being self-indulgent. More recently, my wife was having a sentimental moment with my daughter, with Victoria, and said, "You know, you're always going to be my baby." And Victoria looked at her like she was crazy and said, "Mommy, I can't be a baby forever." And my wife kept trying to explain to her, "But you'll still be my baby." And I finally had to say, "Crystal, I think 3 years old is a little early for the double entendre." As chair, the committee that I chair, the Committee on Technology, Economic Development, and Workforce, is a newly created committee. This is the first session that it's been in existence, and it's my first session to chair this committee. And I'm interested in it for a lot of reasons. I have a background in the technology business and was really excited about diving into those issues. But as I got my hands around the committee's responsibilities, what turned out to be the most interesting thing we're responsible for is the Workforce Commission's administration of $500 million in federal child care funding. Bill Hammond is here. He's a former commissioner. If I'm not incorrect, the Workforce Commission spends more money on child care than it spends on unemployment insurance and job training combined. It's the biggest expenditure they have. But unfortunately, I think, at least from a legislative perspective, it's one of the less understood areas of state spending. It's something that maybe because the state doesn't have a lot of skin in the game, because it's almost all federal money, we just haven't necessarily spent as much time as we spend on some other expenditures thinking about it. As an example, many of you here were part of an apocalyptic battle last session over a $20 million pre-K bill, right? And it was a huge battle, and it was an important bill, but we have a $500 million program where the government has an opportunity to intervene in the lives of children between the ages of 0 to 4 to give them the same passion for the alphabet that Victoria has at the age of 2.5. And I just feel that we need to put as much energy and care into the administration of that system as we've put into the, as the energy we've put into the debate about pre-K. And frankly, we probably ought to, diminish this kind of artificial distinction between the two. Because we know increasingly the science says, 4 years old is important, but 3 years old and 2-year-old and 12 months old are just as important in terms of providing children a level playing field and equal footing, the ability to compete in the future. They need to be the recipients of high quality child care, high quality educational programming from the time they are born if they are going to be able to compete. And if we're going to truly depend on a capitalist system to drive what types of benefits we distribute in society, the only fair way to do that is if we give them the opportunity from the beginning of their lives so that when they reach the 22 years old stage and they're out there in the marketplace competing, they're all competing on a level playing field. So I care passionately about quality in the child care program. And I'm here today mainly to learn from the experts who are going to be speaking the rest of the day about what we can do to improve the quality of the system. And this is all in the context of the newly proposed DFPS regulations that, among other things, would tighten up student-teacher ratios. But as I learn about this issue and as I talk about it with people in the profession, one of the things I feel sometimes gets lost is this extraordinarily difficult value decision that has to be made because we operate largely in a zero-sum environment. Certainly for the foreseeable future, for the next 2 years, with a state facing a potentially $15 billion budget deficit going into the next biennium, it is hard to imagine that we're going to have more money to spend on child care on a per family basis next year than we have in the past year. And because of that, anything we do that increases cost to the extent that it is necessary to increase cost to increase quality, anything we do that increases cost equals fewer children served. And the consequences of that are as devastating or more devastating for the families that get bumped out of the system than the consequences of inferior quality throughout a large system. Because for the families that don't get access to care, when you tighten up the number of families eligible for care because of increased spending per child, because of your desire to increase quality, the families that are bumped out of the system are facing the potential for a spiral of poverty, where the worst problem they face is their kid getting academic rigor in their child care program, is their kid going to get dinner? And because if the parent can't work anymore, because the parent doesn't have any safe place to put their child, or if the parent is forced to put their child into an unregulated provider where there's really no quality control, not even fundamental safety, well, then the situation for that family is made a lot worse. We have to have an open discussion about this choice because it is a terrible bargain. It is a terrible choice to have to make between quality and access. I would like to find ways to make it not be a zero-sum choice. I think if we look at our education system holistically, we spend a fortune in the K-12 education system remediating the academic deficiencies students bring through the kindergarten door.